So welcome everybody. My name is James Dunn and I am the organizer of this Turning the Outbreak into Opportunity Facebook group page challenge. Just wanted to make sure that, as we go through this pandemic and, this situation that we're living through right now, that we take the time to really focus on the positives, the opportunities that are in front of us right now that so many of us always say we want to have extra time to do, spend with family or to work on a project or just reevaluate life. And we've got that opportunity right in front of us now. So don't sit around and, waste this just freaking out on what the news is, trying to force feed us day after day after day. Let's focus on some positivity. So today I've got you an awesome and amazing speaker, and I'm going to read off a nice little introduction here for you. So for those of you who don't know who Johnny is a former Special Operations U.S. Army Ranger with 4 combat tours between Iraq and Afghanistan and a 5-year position with a private company protecting the U.S. ambassador. After years of protecting others and seeing good men suffer from false identities and internal demons, Johnny has now shifted his mission to help men realize they're not alone. Through self-awareness and self-development, they can build a life that's rewarding in relationships and abundant in success. With the help of other special operations men, pro athletes, and self-development people alike, Johnny also uses his podcast to talk about the areas where even the manliest men have struggled and brought themselves back to lead healthy lives. So I want to welcome you officially, Johnny Elsasser. How you doing, brother?
Doing well, man. I appreciate that. And yeah, thank you for the intro, man.
No, I'm excited to see you again. It's been a couple of weeks now, and
Yeah.
I'm already feeling the Jones, man. I'm ready to get back and all of us be back together. So it's good to chat with you here. So we're going to talk about masculinity and unmasking masculinity. I know I myself, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and it was all about blowing stuff up and tough guys don't cry, and it really brought in a lot of repressed feelings and emotions, I think, for a lot of men, because we just didn't know how to express ourselves. So I'm really excited for you to dive into this topic and share today. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, brother. I appreciate that. So first and foremost, everybody, if you're watching this live right now or you're watching this on replay, I don't care. Stand up. Stand up right now. So we're all going to stand up. I want to do a little bit with you guys. And basically, as I pull down my shorts here, basically just let's shake out. Shake out for like 10 seconds, right? Just shake this shit out. All right. And what we're doing, guys, is we're just breaking up this stagnant energy. So if you're sitting around all day, like I might look crazy, but do this shit, right? Yeah, there you go. Get some. Shake this stuff out. All right, cool. So you're breaking up the stagnant energy. You're getting open to learning, right? So you can accept the information and receive the information that I'm going to teach you guys. So the next thing I want you guys to do, and everybody, again, if you're watching this, let's do this immediately. All right, we're going to breathe in deep, but only through our nose. Breathe in through your nose. And then when you release your air, right? So we're going to breathe in deep through your nose. Release. Breathe in deep again. Release. Deep again. Release. Deep again. Release. And one last time. All right, guys. So what you
You still
there?
there?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
there we go.
All right. So I didn't go into it. So I wanted to tell everybody what if you guys just did this breath work, what you guys actually really did for yourself was you actually utilized your paranasal sinuses to produce more nitric oxide within your body. Okay. And the reason why that's extremely important is because nitric oxide is a direct role in vasodilation. So this is basically opening your blood vessels and allowing better blood flow throughout the body. It's anti-inflammatory in your arteries. It's an immune defense, which right now, obviously, if we're all sitting at home, this is a
Yeah.
great thing because it actually, nitric oxide helps destroy viruses and parasites within your body, and then also enhances your memory and learning to accept and receive what's coming in now at this point, amongst a crap ton of other benefits to it. So that's what you guys just did by doing that breath work. So who's actually going to do some more cognitive breathing now? Just knowing that this guy is right.
Yeah.
So like, I love it. Anyways, all right, let's get into this. So guys, I want to ask you guys, how many of you struggle sometimes like feeling like you always have to one up the guy next to you when he's telling a story, especially if there's like a beautiful woman around, right? You
Oh,
always got to be that one upper. Dude, there's
definitely.
guys, be honest about it. I know a lot of you guys struggle with this. I see it on a regular basis, so you really can't hide, but it's definitely something that we struggle with. And then for women, how many of you struggle to get a man to open up about his feelings and share with you? Like, a lot of men don't do it. So there's got to be a lot of women with their hands raised right now. So
Mm.
we're going to kind of build around this by understanding what the foundation of masculinity is going to be. And the reason why we have to understand where the mask of masculinity is really keeping us is so that we can understand where we're going to go with it. And if there's something that we want to change, we have the ability to change it. If you don't know where you develop something, how do you know how you're going to change that, right? So I want to take you guys through that, but I want to provide you guys some tools to help you address these things if you want to change where you're struggling in your masculinity. And then I'm also going to give some single women some tips and tools for helping them with men, and married and relationship women, like married and dating. You guys are going to get some tools too. So we're going to kind of wrap this up and bundle it, not just for men, but this is going to help women as well and give you guys some perspective and insight on how to really work with, either the significant other in your life or with just men in general if you're on the dating scene and stuff like that. So I hope you guys enjoy what's going to come out right now. So the first thing we have to understand, there are four main approaches in which we all, and nobody is exempt from this, in which we all define our masculinity around and where we've built our foundation of masculinity. So the first one that we have is called the essentialist approach, right? And the essentialist approach is where you actually take a core piece, just one core piece of masculinity, and you look at everybody else through that lens, and you look at your own masculinity through that lens. So let's take, for instance, protection, right? If I say, oh, masculinity is based around protecting my family. Let's imagine like a doomsday prepper, right? The guy that's got the bunkers underneath, the guy that you're going to that dude's house when the actual like doomsday happens. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
be knocking on he's gonna quarantine you for 5 days in a separate bunker before he lets you into his compound type thing. Like that guy, if he resides in that masculinity of protection and protecting his family, he's won that game. He's always going to be confident in who he is. He's going to be confident in his masculinity because the one core principle that he focused his masculinity on, he's meeting that, right? And this is called the essentialist. All right. You have to have that essential piece. Now, understand this is going to be very fluid from man to man. So there's no actual structure to this. This is going to change culturally, it's going to change individually. So just keep that in mind. But this is one piece that many of us have developed our masculinity around. The second one is the positivist. Now, this is a scientific based approach to developing your masculinity. So what you did, or what anybody did when they created their masculinity around this, was they actually took scientific data of what they were seeing of common practices that men were doing, and then they said, okay, those are the features of masculinity. So this can range from a lot of different things, but like if you think that owning a gun and being able to shoot or hunting or lifting, all those traits into one being, I'm never so, or to that guy. And let me know if you have any questions, James. I know you might be getting some stuff in Facebook Live, so I don't know. But if they do, just let me know, and
Okay.
I'll answer anything anybody has.
Cool.
But yeah, so essentially you're wrapping your masculinity around common themes and patterns that you're seeing within your general society. And this is going to change regionally within the United States. It's going to change culturally throughout the world. And it's going to change with who the men are even in your circle that are influencing those patterns. So that's the second one. Your third one is the normative approach, right? And a lot of us, I would probably say this is where I defined most of my masculinity from, was the normative approach. But the normative approach is basically what we've seen on like the TV screen or the movie screen. Let's think John Wayne, Sly Stallone, Clint Eastwood, Arnold Schwarzenegger. You got that
Mhm.
picture? All
Yeah.
right, that's the man. Those qualities that they present in most of their movies is where we've defined what a real, true masculine man is, right? The issue with the normative approach is that you've now based your form of masculinity on very unattainable traits because those traits were defined in a controlled environment in which those men were positioned to act a certain way because the environment around them was manufactured. So you don't have that option in real life. You have to deal with whatever comes to you. And you can't act that way in a lot of different situations because we have laws and rules and authority and stuff like that. So, in the normative approach, what we've done is we've created this pillar of masculinity that's unattainable. So then we feel like we're always less than. We never feel super confident because we can't achieve those traits. And then we also are saying that we've created this pillar of normative masculinity that's actually not normal. So then what are you really saying? Is every man not really masculine in society because no one hits all of these goals, right? Nobody hits that pillar. So that's the question that you have to ask yourself with like the normative approach. And the fourth and final approach that we have is the semiotic approach, right? And this is where we've basically created masculinity on objects and based off objects and actions. And this is where they're transferred to us through how they're signified or like symbolized within those objects or actions. So let's give an example here. The first example is like a doll, right? A doll is always associated and forever will be associated with women, with a girl, with feminine, right? But wait a second, we created a GI Joe, right? And he kind of looks like the same size as a Barbie doll.
That's
Let's
an action figure.
That's an action figure. We never called him a doll.
Mm.
That's very right. That's an action figure. That's not a doll. It's a GI Joe or an action figure. Okay? So we never associated the doll with boys with masculine. We did associate things like say toy guns, right? Were very masculine. Those were never seen in a commercial. You ever really seen a Super Soaker commercial with a baby little girl in it? No, it's usually like little boys running around shooting a Super Soaker at one another. So
Mm.
great example of that. We've associated that with masculine. And then when you think back to also the TV shows or cartoons, right, that we watched as kids, you know, the women you didn't even have to understand anything in it because you were watching it before you actually knew the language, but you saw the women in it and whatever they were doing signified what was feminine, and whatever the men were doing and how they acted signified what a man was supposed to do, and that was masculine. So in the semiotic approach, we've based it off of these signals and symbols within our lives that were designed by other people, right? On what was appropriate to be masculine or feminine. And then that's how we ended up developing our own form of what we believe is masculine and what we believe is feminine. So those are the four approaches that we kind of want to really hit on when we talk about, okay, where did I build this understanding of masculinity from? And why are these features so important to me? Right? That's the first step that we have to do is we have to understand that. Because when you figure out why they're so important to you, you can figure out, hey, do they belong to you or does it belong to somebody else?
Mm.
And that's the major question that we have to get to in the conversation of masculinity and how it's developed. If it belongs to somebody else, then does it serve you? And do you still want it? And then if you do want it, you have to and want to make it belong to you. So then it has to become, okay, I do want this. It belongs to me. I want to have this part of who I am. And then I want to make this a feature in which I reside my masculinity and confidence in, you know,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, if it's constantly belonging to somebody else, are you ever really going to feel masculine? Are you ever going to feel confident? No, you're not, because you're chasing something that's not in line with who you are. So that's very important to realize. And there's a lot of guys out there that are struggling with this conversation, which is why I wanted to address where it's where it's coming from and where men can build from. Sorry, want to.
No, go for it, man. But yeah, I mean, I love what you're talking about there about have we picked these things up subconsciously? Are we just, you know, taking on these traits because that's what we've seen in movies and that's what we've seen in, you know, music videos or whatever? Or is it something that we've actively chosen to take these traits on? Because even during the intro, you know, I mentioned I grew up in the 80s and 90s where it was all action movies and like these tough guys, and that's what a man's supposed to be like. And I was never like that. You know, I grew up in a family full of hunters and fishermen, you know, and camping every fucking summer. And I'm like, this is, you know, I was more of the computer nerd guy. And so I never felt like a man because my literally all of my extended family was hunter, you know, every winter we're going out rabbit hunt. We're going to go out squirrel hunt. We're going to go fishing, you know, in the summer. I'm like, apparently I'm not a man because I don't do any of these things.
Yep, exactly. And then you're measuring up to just some stick that you've never even thought was important. And but then it's also kept you back from being like who James Dunn is, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of us men have done that. We've thought we'd had to achieve all these goals. Like, so everybody on Facebook Live, and if you're watching a replay on this, if you thought back to okay, like, why don't I feel happy when I achieve these goals of being a true man? Like, say, for instance, you started making, $500,000 a year and you got this executive position, right? But you're like, well, shit, I still don't feel like super in line and I still don't feel super happy. It's because guess what? You're not in line with who you actually are, because that position never actually mattered to you as a human being, but you took that on because someone told you you had to have that.
Mhm.
So, so that's like a huge important piece to our masculinity and where we're coming from. And for women, like, you guys also developed your expectations of men on these same principles. Like, that's what's important to realize too, because you're expecting a man to be a certain way that comes into your life, and then you ask yourself, well, why can't I get a man that I'm happy with, that treats me this, right, and all this stuff? Well, because number one, your position of masculinity that you're drawing in wasn't based on who you wanted. It was based on what other people taught you as masculine. So you then have to go redefine what it is that's important to you as far as masculinity, and in line with who you are as a woman and your femininity. So that's a huge portion as well. Masculinity traverses both sexes. So don't think that it's just us men. So, all right, we're moving along a little bit. So the next thing that I wanted to mention to you guys, and this is a societal factor. So we talk about hegemonic masculinity, okay? And this is also a foundational piece. So we talked about the four approaches in which we created our masculinity. Hegemonic masculinity is developed by societal expectations of men and women interacting with one another. So in hegemonic masculinity, you have to understand that it's driven predominantly by this patriarchal society, which we are, and the fact that as men, we really set the rules and groundwork in the early stages of development of society. So we've created this system on power and dominance and control and possessiveness, and we've created inequality within that, and then that also has created a role within us men that we always have to have in every situation: power, control, dominance, and in a lot of cases, in really unhealthy relationships, possessiveness.
Mhm.
So these things all lead to one another. But to say this is to let everybody know that hegemonic masculinity is based around those features, but the other party, which is typically the women within society, are complicit in this because they actually support that type of action, right? So they're supporting that type of action by basically buying into the fact that they're supposed to be in the kitchen doing the laundry or taking care of the kids. They're not fighting the systematic approach of hegemonic masculinity, and they're actually then supporting and validating the men to act this way. So, not saying that this needs to be a rebellion, but we have to understand if you guys are supporting that and men are being validated in that, it's hard for men to say, oh, maybe I need to change to make things better, right? To make my relationship better. So in hegemonic masculinity, a lot of guys don't even understand that those traits were actually, again, given to them, not developed by them. So when we talk about this, when we have a conversation about control and possessiveness, let's kind of sit there for a second. Control and possessiveness, because I've heard a lot of this in relationships. Men always want to know where the woman is at. They want to know who they're out with when they go out for a girls' night or a woman. And again, this is complicit. When a woman feels like she has to explain in depth what she's doing that night and who she's doing it with, you are actually creating an environment for hegemonic masculinity and possessiveness and control. So that kind of stuff in relationships causes a lot of damage, and then it supports that system. But we have to break through that because of the fact that men need to know that women are not your possession, and a lot of men probably don't even think this way. This is a subconscious thing that they have to rewire. But like, women aren't your possession. They're just as independent as you men are. And if you want to ask somebody to do something, you better do the same exact shit when you're going out with the boys and explaining exactly what you're doing. While that's a completely unhealthy relationship, you better own the fact that if you're going to ask somebody for something, you better give it in return, right?
Yeah.
So understanding that hegemonic masculinity is it creates a negative environment between the actual of a healthy environment. So that is a foundation of our society, guys. We have to understand that. We have to accept that. And now that we know that, we have to question, okay, how can we change this, right? So going into some of the tips is that, noticing that masculine approaches that you use to develop your life are not serving you. If that's what you're doing right now and you're like, oh shit, well, maybe I don't really want to be that way. Maybe I don't want to be controlling. Maybe I want to be a little more free and allow somebody to be who they are without me being controlling. You have to reconfigure your traits of masculinity. Okay. And by that, what I mean is you have to take inventory of what is important to you as a man, question it, and actually create a list that you feel is important with the man you want to be. And when you do that and you reconfigure that pillar of masculinity within your mind that is attainable for you to live up to, you will ultimately achieve more confidence as a human being and as a man. You're going to achieve a ton more confidence in yourself. And that is going to release you from being controlling, from being possessive, from being wanting all the power, from wanting to be dominant, because you've then brought it inside yourself and said, oh, I actually can acknowledge who I want to be, and I can walk around in full confidence with the man I show up as every day. So that's a first piece. Another tool that we have to understand is that when hegemonic masculinity is playing a role within your relationships, how is that negatively affecting your relationship? And what is it actually driving within you? So I want to actually elaborate a little bit on this because I talked about rewiring, and what rewiring is let's give an example here. So I always use this example because my wife is a messy child in the kitchen and I'm a very clean person in the kitchen. So like I just like have to have the kitchen clean. So when she ends up not cleaning the kitchen, right, after being a fucking tornado all throughout the kitchen, when she gets through and stuff's everywhere, I I used to get angry about it. And I was angry at the fact that I thought it was disrespectful to the other person in the house, i.e., me,
Mhm.
that she wouldn't clean up after herself. Well, I had to take inventory of, was it disrespect? Was it a lack of control that I had over her cleaning? Was it me wanting to dominate the kitchen and be like, no, you need to do as I say and treat the kitchen as I treat it? I had to actually take a look at this. So when I looked at that and I realized that those perceptions and again, I want to highlight this for everybody, write this down. Those perceptions were not serving me. I had to figure out how to synaptically rewire my brain when I saw that scenario to end up changing the perception. So I didn't reside in a chemical response of anger and judgment. Okay. So if this is over your head or if this is like a lot for somebody to understand, I'm going to break this down pretty simply. Okay. What it is every time you see a situation, especially when we get into our mid 30s, we've created a hardwired system within our brain that immediately when you see a situation, it triggers a chemical response within your body, which then triggers an emotion. Your emotion and chemical response is all tied into your brain's perception. So when you see that situation, if you see like the kitchen not clean, immediately you're thinking to yourself, okay, stop. Let's cut off that synaptic response of saying, of judging and getting angry. And let's rewire and imagine a new connection, rewiring that, oh, she may not have had enough time because she's extremely busy today. I'll take care of this. And then all of a sudden, immediately after that, you stop. You won't go to anger. You won't go to judgment. You'll just do it, and then you'll get along with your day. And it's not allowing somebody to not be accountable. It's just understanding that not having the perception of people always being negative towards you. You're not playing the victim anymore, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we want to get away from. So when you realize those hegemonic masculinity roles are causing this chemical reaction within your body due to the perception that you're having, you can start to change that perception and then start to release that role of yelling at your wife or significant other for not cleaning, right? Which is establishing the dominance again and the control. You can stop having the resentment that you're carrying around for half the evening because they didn't clean, and you want to hold that emotion inside, right? Like, you will do yourself wonders by doing that. And the last tool that I want to talk to you guys about is for the men lacking confidence, right? So identifying that you are not confident because you haven't achieved some of these traits that you have or that you believe are instilled in all men. If you're lacking confidence because of that, you have to identify the masculine traits that you hold closest to you. So I want you guys to kind of like hear that is what is usually not more than like five to guys. Their most important trait is, do they have the most money? Money is a huge driver for men. Okay. Do they have the most money? Do they have the best, highest job? Am I a CEO, a CFO? Am I in charge of a company as a president or vice president? Like, what is it, right? You have to find out what that most important masculine trait is. And then from there, you can understand, does this is this in line with the man you want to be at this point, or does it need to change? And then if it does need to change, what's the trait that you want to embody that is going to help you to branch out to be a better man and build more positive traits around that, right? So, or those, right? Not just one, but it could be
Yeah.
two or three. So for instance, an example of this is I've always held the fact that I am very good physically at anything I want to do. And I've always resided in the fact that my masculinity was tied with being able to physically challenge myself to some of the most extreme environments and succeed in them. Okay. I've taken pride in that my whole life. So a guy that walks in a room that's making $17 million a month doesn't make me feel like less of a man. He doesn't make me feel like less of a man, because at the end of the day, my masculinity is not tied up with how much money he makes. And my masculinity is actually tied up with more so with the guy that comes in and says, "Oh yeah, I've also climbed Everest backwards with no oxygen tank." And you're like, "Ah, shit. All right,
Yeah.
that guy got me." That guy
Yeah.
got me, right? So like you have to figure out where that important piece is of where you're residing around your masculinity. And that's going to help you to understand, okay, what is beneficial to build around this and what is my central theme for masculinity. All right. So
Yeah.
everybody stop right now for 1 second. If you're watching this, stop. Let's take a picture and tag me on Instagram and tag James on Instagram and share this with your community and let everybody know how much you're enjoying this conversation. So we're going to give you a thumbs up. Let's go ahead and let's tag this. Take a picture. All right. Now you guys can sit back. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I love this. I love what you're sharing. I mean, some of the big ones, some of the big takeaways I got here was, creating basically your own list of masculine traits. Don't just subject yourself to, what's portrayed in the media or even the people around you. You really have to sit back and take time and define yourself, what you inherently believe, defines you as a man. um, However that plays out with what anybody else is portraying, like you just said, somebody who's making $17 million a year or $17 million a month, and that could just really make somebody feel like I'm not a man anymore.
Yep.
But if money's not what you really hold your masculinity around, well, that doesn't mean anything. It's
Nope.
and I'm with you. A lot of it's, I'm a skinny guy, but that's the one thing I've always been able to go do marathons and this and that, whatever. So then when I'm running marathons, I'm like, yeah, I'm a badass. And then I hear somebody doing like a fucking Ironman, I'm like, well, shit, and like I said, then they're doing Everest, and then they're doing Kilimanjaro. I'm like, damn it. And you get to that point of like, well, how far do I need? And I've actually found myself in the situation where, like, say I feel like I'm a bit more of a man because of these physical things that I can do. But then no matter what level I get to, I see somebody like fucking Wim Hof, like said, who climbs Everest in a fucking pair of shorts.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, where's the pinnacle, man?
Exactly.
Where do you stop?
Exactly. And that's a great point, because in a lot of ways what happens is the bar is always going to be getting moved. No matter where you hold your masculinity in, that bar is constantly, that goalpost is constantly getting shifted by somebody else that is doing different stuff, and then kind of resetting what that expectation is. And there's a point where you're like, if you ask Wim Hof, there's probably somebody out there that he looks up to, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's just all these different things that you're never going to be able to achieve that. So what happens is that you have to find out what's important to you and find out what that level of, that's where my confidence is. That's where I'm going to be the best version of myself every day of the week. And then that's going to help me to show up as the man I want to show up every day, and the man I want everybody to see, and the positive masculinity that's going to influence other people to be positive. So it's a great thing. And the fact that this is the other problem with society, is that when society has defined masculinity for you, you think that there's a structured prescription of masculinity, but there's not. Studies have, I mean, the social science behind this proves the fact that masculinity is not standardized between any two men or any culture around the world. It's not standardized. There's no measurement to say there's one common theme for everywhere for masculinity. There's not.
Wow. That's
So,
crazy.
yeah.
So, and yeah, I'm question for you. Like I talked about, I grew up in this family of the hunters, the fishermen. That was kind of the role models that I had around me, but I never felt connected to that. So, what tips or suggestions would you give to anybody who finds himself in an environment like that, where they're surrounded by people who have a different version of masculinity? How do they kind of stand in their own power of saying, okay, this is me and this is how I define masculinity? Anything? Because I mean, we can say, well, just fucking, stand up and just be a man, but any kind of tips or suggestions around something like that?
No, I would never say stand up and be a man, because that's a fucking, in my opinion, that's an idiotic statement, because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, what is really a man? Because I can challenge you on what is a man. And then
Yeah.
you're going to say some shit and I'm like, well, that's not a man, right? Like,
Exactly.
we just talked about how fluid masculinity is. So that's not a man to me. Like,
Yeah.
so stand up and be a man has nothing to do with it. My biggest thing is, if you're surrounded in a situation that you feel incredibly uncomfortable in and is not aligned with you, like you mentioned, the fact that never really sat well with you growing up, I would challenge you to sit down alone with yourself and really write down, and I say write down because this is a great way of getting it out of your head. Write down what's important to you as an authentic human being and man. What are the traits that are literally authentic to you, regardless of what you're surrounded in? If that trait is something to do with, well, I want to be a good dresser because I like actually being fashionable. I want to understand cryptocurrency because I think technology is amazing and I like understanding um, the way that the e-commerce is going. Like, if there's certain things you really feel masculine about and that's what makes you sit up and be confident, find out what those are. And regardless of what you're surrounded in, once you find out what those are, start educating yourself and getting super indoctrinated with those traits. Because then when you go step out around the hunters and the fishers and everything else, and they're talking about shit like, you know, oh yeah, I dressed this deer yesterday. What did you do? And you're like, I fucking bought like $30,000 of cryptocurrency with like $10 of my own money. What?
Yeah.
How did you do that? Like you're on a different level, and what's going to happen is it's going to create a different energy within you to actually start bringing in more people that are in line with your masculinity into your life. And I promise you guys it will. That is exactly what's going to happen, because you're actually going to change your chemical construction to, and your people might think this is weird, but let's get real get real sciencey and kind of woo woo here. But like Dr. Joe Dispenza says, you
Mm.
can actually change your DNA. So you will start to change your genetic code and DNA to start creating a different type of energy output that brings in people within your life that's in line with who you want to be as a man when you figure out and you start owning those traits. So that's what I
Awesome.
would tell. Yeah, that's what I would tell you.
Yeah, I love that.
So I promised two more things to the community, and for single women, right? So we're gonna shift over to my feminine compadres here. The single women, I get a question quite often, which is, how do I stop dating douchebags? Right? Like
It's
it's
an
a
important question to ask. Yeah.
it's a common thing, right? So like, how do I stop dating douchebags? And women, you guys might hate to hear this, but what is your energy output? Okay. What is that energy that you're pushing out that's attracting that type of man to you? Because it's not him that's finding you, it's you attracting him, right? So what you're doing is you're attracting what your internal energy is putting out. Like, you may be the best person with like a heart of gold, but if you're constantly beating yourself up about being broke or being stupid or ugly, or you have anger issues, like if you haven't dealt with that stuff internally, you're constantly carrying a form of energy around, whether um, it's depression or negativity, whatever it is, you're carrying that energy around and you're bringing that douchebag into you. You're saying, yeah, man, like you're like that moth to a lamp. Like, that's all he is. He sees that energy, he's attracted to it, he's coming for it. And regardless of what you try to do externally, if you're not doing the correct stuff internally to change that energy output, you will always find Mr. McDouchebag. Always. And this is vice versa though. Like, if you're out there putting the work into yourself to own who you are, to be confident in who you are, to show positivity and love to yourself and gratitude and respect, you're going to in turn put out an energy that is attracting a guy that respects you, that loves you, that is kind and is a good listener and is the man that you're actually looking for, because then your energy output has shifted, and that's the moth now. The moth that you actually wanted is now coming to your light. So let's put a little bit of science around this real quick. And 99.9% of matter is actually energy. And this was tested. All right. There was a scientist who tested this, and he shot a particle of matter into, or shot it through, I think, gold or something like that. I can't remember the exact scientific experiment that took place, but I think he shot it through gold. and he realized 99.9% of that matter actually went through. So the story goes that the science of what was there was actually only energy, not matter. It's a pretty insane thing to think about, but we are all energy, guys. We are more energy than you are physical matter. Like, so understanding that that energetic pole has a huge effect on what is happening in your life is very paramount to actually changing what is happening in your life. So use that to your advantage.
That's
And
awesome.
then the last one I have for you guys, all right, is to deal with the women who are dating or married. Okay. So one of the questions I get a lot from this group is, how do I get my guy to come along for the journey while I'm finding myself? Because there's nothing worse than doing work on yourself and having a guy who's sitting around playing video games and Call of Duty and yelling at the 13-year-old on the other side of the freaking screen, right? Like, than that guy who's not doing his work, and then you're sitting here trying to figure out how you can be a better person, loving, and bringing in the right things into your life to be in tune with your future self. So men need to make realizations on their own. They will not listen to you. Okay, I
What?
promise you guys. Yeah,
You guys
I
don't listen? What?
James can confirm this. If a woman is coming to you and saying, I would like you to do X, Y, and Z, how likely are you to listen to that? I'm telling you right now, I know this for a fact because my wife tried this on me early on. And I was like, yeah, you're funny. Great choice. I'm gonna go watch this movie right now. Have fun listening to your podcast, right? So like, guys will not follow what you're saying. They have to make a realization on their own. They have to discover self-development for themselves, or even if they try to, it's gonna be forced. They're gonna eventually resent you, and in the end, it is going to turn out to be a freaking nightmare anyways, right? So some of the ways I recommend women to get guys to buy into this on their own, right? And guys listening right now, I don't really care because I'm going to give them some secrets. So one of the secrets I love that my wife did to me was she did psychological warfare. Okay. And what I call psychological warfare is she would put on, say, a podcast, or she'd put on an audio book in the car when we were doing a long drive that was like a science-based, logical, but also self-development book. Or she would put on a podcast of somebody like Lewis Howes, or somebody out there that's got this great content, Josh Trent or somebody like that, and she'd put it on while like I was making dinner or something like that, right? And so I'd hear it and I'd be like, oh shit, that was actually really good. And then when she's gone, the next thing I do is maybe I'm pulling up his podcast on my own, right? Or maybe I'm looking into a book he mentions, right? So that psychological warfare is a beautiful thing on your significant other or the guy that you're dating and you want him to join along for the ride. Um, if you do that, it's definitely like going to put some subliminal messaging within his subconscious. So even if he cognitively doesn't acknowledge it right away, that subliminal messaging repetitively will eventually take hold. It really will. That's why it's such a good tactic in actual war, by the way. So another tactic is to sit down with them and be honest about pain areas where men respond. And by this, what I mean is, if you sit down to them and you talk to them and say, I think that, you know, if you were to be more open to listening to some of the stuff like I'm listening to it, uh, it can improve our connection as a couple. Or maybe, you know, we'll have some more sex because I'll feel more connected to you energetically, or our communication will get better. These are all pain points for men. We hate to not have good communication because most of us are not passive aggressive when it comes to that. A lot of men are more direct, which ends up making like a lot of really bad situations sometimes if the woman's not as direct. So, but a lot of men are very direct in their stuff and they're kind of callous, which can make us look like assholes. Sex is always a great way, not leveraging it, saying that it may improve our sex life, right? Improve our energetic other, which turns me on. Like if a woman says that turns me on, oh dude, sign me up. When my wife says that, like that turns me on. one time she said, "Hey, I love when you play jazz music when you're cooking. Like that turns me on." I was like, "Every night I cook, it's jazz music." Sweet, man. Oh yeah, I love jazz. I've always loved this stuff, you know.
Heck yeah.
But that's the thing, it does. And then the connection. Guys love to have the connection because guess what? When men are concerned about control, possessiveness, and dominance and stuff like that, if they're still in that mentality, if you tell them that they're going to connect with you better and you're going to be more open about that connection, they now get to kind of feel that sort of control, but through a medium that you're allowing them to do it. If this makes sense, right? You're allowing them to have that deeper connection where you want to expose more of what you're doing to them because you feel like they support and love you. Like that's going to be built.
Johnny, you there?
Really what they're going through or where they are in their self-development journey, but they're going to respond pretty well to this. And there you go.
Okay. I was like, did we freeze there? Oh,
You're back.
okay.
You're there. There we go.
The
At
beauty
the
of
end of
technology.
yeah, right. At the end of the day, like inherently, men love to be protectors, and we love to be reliable. So if you tell us how to be a better protector and a better reliable partner, we're already going to buy into that. We are going to buy into that 100%. So leverage those tools, women, and make sure that you're using them in a constructive way to benefit your goal, but also to bring the men along with you on that journey so then they become better men as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely what you hit on there. We as men, we want to be the problem solver. We want to help, but so many times, just that communication, it's so hard to figure out. Because women communicate differently than men do,
Yeah.
and so when the women do open up that avenue, like you just said, when your wife says, "Hey, I love when you play jazz music while you're cooking," like you said, fucking, I would be doing the same thing every day. I'm cooking every day, honey, and I'm playing that jazz music.
Yep.
You give me the tools, and I promise I will use them. It's
Yeah.
me trying to figure it out on my own. That's why I'm divorced twice, man.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about this conversation is, yeah, that's huge. Is just open up those avenues and help us out here.
Yeah, give us the answers to the test, and most guys will subscribe to it. But don't position it in a way that it's an alternative or a ultimatum.
Yeah,
Position it in a way that it's constructive, and that's my key for all women. Is as long as you're making it constructive, the guy is going to respond very, very well to it. So
yeah, and I love what you mentioned before too. Like you said about, yeah, just don't make it an ultimatum, but just she was to play the podcast, in the background. She wasn't like, "Hey, Johnny, you need to listen to this. This is, I want you to fucking sit down, and listen to this, and I want you to do everything this person says." You were just, listening to it and just in the background, and you would pick up those little bitty pieces. And like I said, you're wanting to ultimately, make your wife happy. And so you're going to pick up some of those pieces and like, oh, wow, that's good information. And you're going to connect with her on another level. You're going to start seeing some things the way she sees them. And like I said, not to, you know, morph your mind or um, change who you are, but you're just going to connect on a deeper level because you understand more where she's coming from. She's like, oh, this is stuff she connects with, so now I can understand where she's coming from and what her like, again, what her perspective is. So I think it's great.
absolutely, man. No, but I love it. And then you end up speaking the same language as her, and then you end up doing it. This is the most important thing. The guy ends up doing it on his own time. Like
Yeah,
he's not forced. So
yeah,
that's a key component to that. But yeah, man, that's my spiel for everybody today. And so I hope that everybody got something out of this, and I hope that it was super constructive for you guys. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask James or ask me, and we can dive into any different questions that you may have. So
yeah, definitely. Just scrolling through the Facebook feed here, got definitely a bunch of people tuned in and seem to be enjoying it, getting a lot of 100s and loves. And Terry on here, she's saying, yes, it's like you're speaking directly to my husband and I.
great.
Yeah, so that's what we love. And Jess Glazer, she sends us both some love. So
Oh yeah.
love Jess. Yeah. But yeah, and Jillian. Yep, Jillian Murphy. She's on here sending some love too. So yeah, but awesome and amazing stuff. And like I said, definitely if you guys have any other questions, reach out to me, reach out to Johnny, and just to make sure they can connect with you, what's the best place for people to connect with you, Johnny?
Yeah, jump over to Instagram at johnny.elsasser. Last name is spelled Elsasser, or I think you can probably see it in my little name.
Yeah.
But Elsasser, or find me on Facebook at The Art of Masculinity. And then if you guys enjoyed the conversation, I do have a podcast as well called The Art of Masculinity that you guys can find anywhere that you listen to, you subscribe to your podcast. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, brother. It's good seeing you, and we'll definitely have to connect
Absolutely.
again offline here soon. But I think that's got us all, and I don't see any other questions on here, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the day. And
Yeah, bro.
all right, you guys all take care, and we will see you again on the next one.
Take your last pictures.
Yeah. See you, brother.
Later, brother.